Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 3rd and tonight's movie is The Empty Man. I just saw the trailer and apparently this is surrounding, I guess, an urban legend about how if you're on a bridge and you find an empty bottle and then you blow into it and then you think about the empty man, he will find you and kill you in 3 days. First of all, that makes the title a lot more literal than I was expecting. It's not the man who's empty, it's referring to an empty bottle, I think. And second of all, that's a lot like Peeping Tom from Butterfly Kisses, which did in fact come first. This movie is from 2020. The setup is very simple, and apparently this movie follows an ex-cop who's trying to investigate a series of deaths. Deaths that might be connected to the Empty Man urban legend and possibly a cult surrounding it. I will say I'd love to know if this movie is going to attempt to make the act of blowing into an empty bottle and making a little note scary, threatening. I'd love to see them try. That doesn't seem possible. Now that I think about it, if they try to use that as a scare, I'm probably just going to laugh at it. But hey, I shouldn't judge. I haven't seen it yet. Let me go fix that and watch the movie. First and foremost, yes, they actually did try to scare me with people blowing into empty bottles, and yes, it was just as laughable as I thought it was going to be. There were a lot of things that I liked in The Empty Man, and there were a few things that I found very confusing. I think overall, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. It is a very interesting and weird movie, but I kind of liked it. Apparently, this was based off of a graphic novel. I have no idea how faithful of an adaptation it was. It might explain the pacing, because the pacing in this movie is very strange. It started out with a group of 4 hikers in Bhutan, and it made me wonder, it's like, do I have the wrong movie? Because this is nothing like the trailer. And I thought this was just going to be like an opening kill scene or something like that, but then it just kept going. We eventually do get to the plot I was told about in the trailer, but only after 22 minutes of these hikers doing stuff. We got 22 minutes of lore before we even saw the title screen. One thing that I did like about this movie is some of the dialogue and like moments of levity. I've talked in the past about how it's kind of a slippery slope, because if you add too many of those, you risk the movie feeling like it's not taking itself seriously enough. The Empty Man, I feel, did strike a really good balance. The dialogue felt natural, the conversations seemed regular, and the main character was well written and well acted. Like, he was a good main character. I feel like this might have been one of those unfortunate occasions where the movie's trailer sort of did it dirty and misrepresented the movie, because I was expecting a movie about an urban legend like come to life in the form of a supernatural entity, and it kind of started out that way, but as the movie kept going, it got further and further away from that and turned into something else. Expanding further would be going too far into spoilers, but this isn't really a movie about this urban legend come to life. It's mostly a movie about a cult. And what are the odds that yesterday I was talking about how I couldn't really think of an example of a scare in a movie where like a large crowd of people all stop and turn to look as one, and that was one of these scares that happened several times in this movie. The horror in Empty Man wasn't anything spectacular, but it was executed pretty well. It doesn't really do jump scares. There might have been 1 or 2, but there was an example of finding a dead body and there was no loud noise coming with it. In fact, the movie is quite good at using silence to create terror. But this movie does not shine its brightest when it's trying to be scary. I feel like a lot of the confusion that I'm feeling from it just sort of comes from the fact that the trailer pushed me in a direction that wasn't really where the movie was going. But at the same time, I almost kind of feel like that they should have spent more time doing the cult thing and less time doing this weird transitional part. But then again, that might also have something to do with the graphic novel that this was adapted from. I got Wicker Man when I was expecting Candyman, so I was just kind of caught off guard. I didn't think it was a bad movie. It was very interesting and well done at a lot of points. There's a lot of good things in it, and my biggest criticism would just be I didn't like the way that the movie was paced. There are a lot of spoilers to get into, so I'm going to start with that now. Ironically enough, even though the first 22 minutes of this movie was just lore, once we actually get to the plot proper, it feels like we're just put in the middle without getting any of the background first. We don't really know much about our main character, James. We don't really know anything about his relationship with other characters. They're just sort of like, oh, this is Lori. Yeah, you know Lori. Okay. And we certainly don't know what this has to do with those 4 hikers in Bhutan. For like the first half of the movie, we do get that sort of Candyman, Bloody Mary, urban legend type of horror movie, but it quickly transitions after that into this cult. And I think that the writing of this cult was done very well. We heard a higher up talk, and when he talked, he reminded me a lot of Keith Raniere. I won't go into detail about who that is, but like if you know, you know. The movie kind of just stops being about the empty man as in like the supernatural entity and becomes more about the cult and how much they like interweave in the main character's life as he tries to get to the bottom of a missing young woman. And at the very end, major spoiler, we get the twist that he was the main character, James. He was literally created like 3 days ago to become the new empty man, the new vessel for this supernatural entity that this cult worships. The first vessel was the one surviving hiker from the 22 minutes at the beginning, and his body was giving out, so they like manifested. That's a big thing in this cult, the idea of being able to manifest things into reality through the power of the mind and all that mumbo jumbo. They apparently conjured up James, like complete with a backstory, complete with past relationships, a history, regrets, emotions, all that stuff, so that he could become the new vessel. It's like the twist at the end of Kill List, except this movie didn't piss me off the entire time. I like the idea of playing with the idea of when you're like jumped into a story, when you're put into a story, you're just like, okay, this is a character. What's he like? What's he doing? Like, how is his backstory? And you just sort of take it for granted in your mind that even though you just like entered into their lives at this one point and they didn't exist before that, there's just this whole backstory that comes with it. The movie isn't really scary. I did like the writing, though, at a few points, especially with some of the dialogue. Like, there's a point where James is talking to this high school girl about something, and she asks for a cigarette, and he goes, "You do know smoking is bad for you, right?" And she literally just gives him this look, and that communicated so much. There was that thing I was talking about how the entire crowd of people was moving as one in response to what James was doing, and he literally went, "Yeah, no," and then he ran away. Little moments like that were my favorite in The Empty Man. Little parts of it are really good, but when you put it all together, especially the way that it was put together, I feel like it's not as good as it could have been. I still thought it was decent, though. It might have just been better in the form of a graphic novel than a movie, but I don't know. As a movie, I thought it was good. And with that, I'll see you tomorrow.